For decades, no one would talk about the atrocities that reduced this community to ashes in 1921. So the question is here, how can a massacre that killed so many people, ruined so many lives, and devastated a town remain so hidden, so forgotten?
Some of them had guns. They're outnumbered.
My name is Lloyd Ware. I'm a retired teacher from Tulsa Public School for 34 years.
I found Mr. Ware giving a tour to a friend at John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park in Greenwood. The park serves as a memorial to the massacre and a tribute to the role of black people in building this state. This afternoon, Mr. Ware was a teacher all over again. As an educator in Tulsa, Mr. Ware saw the conspiracy of silence firsthand.
It's not in the history books. I mean, you can find things about what Washington did, what Lincoln did, World War I, World War II, the Civil War. But to expose or tell someone about what happened in a community that could be an embarrassment is not something that you're going to readily share. It's something that you're going to have to be forced to share because someone else is exposing it.
As the expression goes, knowledge is power. But has that power translated to acknowledging one of Oklahoma's darkest chapters?
If you ignore the problem, it doesn't go away. You got the knowledge. There need to be some soul searching. That was a period of time, yes. But what are you going to do about it? How much progress has been made in 100 years?
100 years, most of it a century of silence, even for the people who have called Oklahoma home for their whole lives.
It was never taught in the school. It did, I remember in high school back in the 80s, that it was in the Oklahoma history book only for about a paragraph or two. But the history of the Klan went on for chapter after chapter after chapter.
J. Kavin Ross says both races had their reasons to keep the massacre hidden.
White folks didn't want to talk about it because it was a blemish, a stain on a city that was trying to build up its image. And so nobody talked from that community. The black folks didn't talk about it because of the fact that those people who committed the atrocity were still around. They were threatening another massacre had anybody talked it up again. And so you had these communities separated, but together they were silent.
Ross has dedicated himself to telling the stories of massacre survivors. I met with him at the memorial dedicated to the hundreds of businesses that were destroyed. And that includes the stories of his own family.
Isaac Evans Zulu Lounge, which stood right over there, pretty much where that gold sign is.
That lounge, once belonging to his great-grandfather, etched into history. Nothing left to show for it but a name carved in stone.
Because who's to say, had it not been for that massacre and the destruction, that freeway is sitting on top of my inheritance. That could have been my Zulu Lounge today, had it not been gone through its destruction.
And in that moment, I learned just how deep the conspiracy of silence runs. When did you find out? That was later on in life?
Yeah, about 5 years ago. I found out about my great-grandfather. I didn't know that much about it. It wasn't passed down to me. I'm just now understanding the role of my family. I studied everybody else's role, but I'm just now coming across my own family's role.
Some didn't just try to cover it up. Some tried to erase it from history completely. Something one of the only living survivors, 107-year-old Viola Fletcher, told members of Congress she won't let happen.
I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I will not.
Many say the conspiracy of silence started to unravel with another tragedy happening just 90 minutes down the road, 1995's bombing in downtown Oklahoma City at the Alfred P. Murrah Building. State Representative Don Ross, Jay Kavin's father, was speaking to a reporter a year later.
And one of the reporters was talking to my father and made the statement that it's the worst event that happened on American soil. And my father had to stop and said, no, the worst one is just an hour away in Tulsa.
That statement piqued national media interest, and soon people who had never heard of the massacre before started looking for answers. In 1997, Representative Ross introduced legislation to create the Oklahoma Commission to study the Tulsa race riot of 1921, saying, quote, justice demands closure as it did with Japanese Americans and Holocaust victims of Germany. The commission issued its report in 2001, which outlined damage, potential reparations, and the death toll.
When the reports come out, the official report saying this is what happened, this happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we can see the remnants of that. People had to acknowledge, rather than say it's folklore, they had to acknowledge this was real.
But it took a while for schools to begin to acknowledge the massacre as well. Teaching the massacre is a relatively new thing for educators around the country, even in Tulsa. Alicia Latimer is the African American Resource Center coordinator for the Tulsa City County Library System.
If the students don't know, if they're not taught, if they don't understand white privilege, if they don't understand how a person is being made to feel different or less than, or trying to anyway, then we're going to have that same issue repeatedly.
People like her work to make sure the stories are not forgotten.
So at the library, we created 1921 Race Riot Kits several years ago with the YWCA, so that the teacher who says, I really don't know how to teach about the 1921 race massacre, I think I can help you with that. We have empathy kits for teachers who say, well, I don't know how to talk about it to little children. Well, that's okay, we got some children's empathy kits.
But advocates say that push to educate seems to be hitting a roadblock.
We can and should teach this history without labeling a young child as an oppressor or requiring he or she feel guilt or shame based on their race or sex. I refuse to tolerate otherwise.
Governor Kevin Stitt signing a controversial bill just this month. House Bill 1775 restricts what can be taught about racial divisions through history in Oklahoma classrooms.
The concern is that these core pieces of our history won't be told to students, and we're creating a systemic barrier for having those conversations that could lead to reconciliation and enlightenment to a lot of students. That bill getting pushback from major districts like Oklahoma City, many saying they will continue to teach what happened in our past in order to better our future.
As a district, we don't need this bill.
It's racist. It's cowardly. It's micromanaging.
In spite of the signing of House Bill 1775, people are hopeful that the truth is starting to be uncovered. But it turns out the deeper you dug, the uglier the truth became. Let's revisit that 2001 commission report. Before it was published, it was widely believed that only a few dozen people died. But the report estimated that anywhere from 100 to 300 people lost their lives. It went on to say, quote, while the white riot dead appear to have all been given proper burials, little effort was made by the white authorities to identify the bodies of black riot victims. Indeed, as both long-forgotten funeral home records and death certificates would confirm, some unidentified African-American riot victims were hurriedly buried in unmarked graves at Oaklawn Cemetery. Tulsa was sitting on a buried secret.
Do you think that there are potentially bodies just spread out everywhere?
Yes, according to the Race Riot Commission report, although those reports about bodies thrown in the Arkansas River, various parts of the city, even taken out of town.
Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum says his city is on a mission to dig deeper. Bynum says more and more stories have been uncovered over the last few years, decades of secrets finally coming into the light.
People of all races, all political parties coming forward and saying, well, I've never told anybody outside my family about this, but my grandfather told me about how he saw bodies being buried in this location. Or my great-grandmother told me a story about how she saw bodies being buried in this other location. And what we found was there was this whole oral history here in Tulsa that had been passed down through families, but they had never had a productive outlet for it before. And so we've collected those stories, and they're really helping guide a lot of the search that we're doing, trying to find the mass graves from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre.